Well, I'm a newcomer in Atherstone, really, I suppose. I've only been here 52 years. 52 years next week, actually. I married Judith 52 years ago, March the 4th, 1972. So, but I've had a lovely time here. Atherstone's a brilliant place to be. I've got two great lads who I'm really proud of. They've really done well in their lives. Really good. I'm getting all choked up now. And but I did know Atherstone a little bit before then, because I was an apprentice at W.D. Randall's of Hartshill. And anybody who knows Randall's house, which is called the Orchard, is at the top of Convent Lane, on the junction between Convent Lane and Church Walk. And I knew it as a great big mansion house at the age of 15. I've been there recently in the last couple of years, and it looks tiny now because it stood in its own ground. It had swimming pool, rose trees, orchard, fabulous. It had a ballroom on the side, and the ballroom had a sprung dance floor like Blackpool, a cocktail bar, and a balcony viewing gallery that you could go up and sit and watch. Billy Randall was a great ballroom dancer, and Mrs. Randall. I was an apprentice painter and decorator with him for 6 years, so I worked in the Orchard house for quite a time, on and off. One of my first jobs was in the gable. If you ever go up there and have a look, the gable is about a foot away from the wall, so you could actually stand in the gable to paint it, which, being the youngest and the thinnest and less weight, I suppose, that used to be given my job. So you actually stood in the gable, rubbed it down and painted it. And Billy Randall, he didn't like painters. I don't know why, he just didn't like painters. He did say that a good painter will make a bad carpenter any day, so he must have had quite a liking to us, but not too much. But it was a different time then, and on my first time going up there, as any of the other lads did, you was inspected. So Mrs. Randall would have you in the kitchen and she'd check you over to make sure your overalls were clean, freshly washed, and not dusty or dirty to come into my house. I'm not having your... But one of the things that she was really keen on was your shoes. Your shoes have got to be clean and polished as normal. But if there were those rubber soled shoes, you could make a brown mark or a black mark on the parquet floor. So you were out. You had to go and either work with a gardener or work in your socks or bring a pair of slippers next day. And you worked in a pair of slippers. So it was quite keen, but a beautiful job to work on. And all the woodwork was white oil-based eggshell. And when that's done well over a build-up of coats and flatted down, wet and dry sandpaper down in between, you could get it like a piece of white porcelain. Beautiful. The rooms were really high ceilings and got decorative cornices that were sort of 2 feet deep with fluorescent lights at the back. So you could have those and they'd shine up through the cornices. The doors were white with a thin gold line around the door panels. And then we'd been working there a few years, different times. She used to have us there spring cleaning, where you'd have the orange dusters folded in a certain way, and you'd do a yard square, then you'd have to fold it, do a yard square, have to fold it, do a yard square, till you'd use that up, and she'd have a pile this high that you'd take away and wash, dry it on the Arga, and away you'd go again. And then what a good story. One spring, he came and said, leave what you're doing. I want you to wire brush the white edging to the swimming pool and then paint it in snow sim. So, okay, easy enough job. So we went down, there was a couple of 3 of us, went down, wire brushed the edge and started ready to paint it. And he came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder and he said, Brian, and I nearly fell in the pool because must have been 18 or 19, and that was the first time he'd ever called me by my name and not "or you" or whatever. So he said, "I've got a bit of a job for you, leave that for a minute and come with me." He took me round the back of the house to where the outhouses were, the old coal house, and the cottages that run off from the back of the house. Opened the door, and this shed, coal house, was stacked from floor to ceiling with dried oss muck poo. And he said, there's some gloves there and a riddle. What I want you to do is riddle this into the barrow. The gardeners are putting some new roses in. I want you to take it round, wheelbarrow it round to the gardeners, tip it in the trench as they're putting the roses in. Okay. So I did that. I filled one barrow, went round, coming back with the second barrow, and he stopped me. He said, "Leave that. Go back to what you were doing. I'll find somebody else to do that." And I went back to the lads. I said, "What did you tell? What he's had me doing?" And they said, "Well, you've been working in the house." These are the older lads who knew. He says, "You've been working in the house doing all this fancy work, fancy jobs. And it's just to tell you that even though you've worked and done all this nice work in my house, I'll still have you shoveling shite if I want you to." So that was like putting me back in my place. I said I've got two wonderful lads who went through scouting, Cub Scouts, Venture Scouts. The oldest one, John, did the Explorer Belt, and part of the Explorer Belt was backpacking across part of Canada. The younger one, Michael, he went through the Duke of Edinburgh Awards. But the scouting movement then used to have gang shows, and the scouting movement, the people that could get involved and get the knowledge that they could bring in was wonderful. And I know how to use a paintbrush, the wet end from the dry end, and so I got painting the scenery, the sets, building the sets, marvellous things. One of the things the gang show did, they used to come up with these great ideas and then say, "That's the idea, we want you to put it into motion," was the Magnificent Men in their flying machines. And we built a Spitfire out of plywood, and I imagine, my memory is going, must have been 6 foot at least. It could have been 8 feet, but it was at least 6 foot long, and it was to come from the lighting gallery at the Memorial Hall, which is quite high up if you picture that, on ropes. And you've got people in the Scouts who are mountaineers, knew all about the ropes, the pulleys and fitting. And this Spitfire, painted out as a Spitfire with the roundels and numbers and letters and the camouflage paint, was up in the viewing gallery up there. They played the Magnificent Men in the flying machines, released this, the Spitfire came down above the audience, crashed through the curtains closed, there was a big flash, and this was one of the lads who could get out of military quality thunder flashes in a box. Health and safety, there wasn't such a thing. And this went off, and then the curtains went back after a few seconds. The pilots came back out through the curtains with their helmets all skewed, the shirts ripped, faces black, to this Magnificent Men. You couldn't do it today. But that got me into painted scenery sets. So then the amateur dramatics heard about that. No, just the bloke to come and paint scenery and sets. So I did it and still do, for the amateur dramatics. I've just done some sets for the young amateur dramatics called Act 2, which they're putting their show on I think it's sometime 10th of March, sometime in March anyway. They're putting the show on, and so then from that I was coming to I wasn't even close to retiring. About 12 years ago, the Leading Players got me involved. Now, the Leading Players is a wonderful, wonderful group of people with learning difficulties, and they usually put on a summer play. In the last couple have been in the Hatters grounds, in the Hatters park at the back of Owen Street, and then they do a Christmas pantomime. A lot of work goes into it. I can't praise them up enough. They've let me, as an honorary member, come on stage with them a couple of times, and I'm sweating. I've got to remember this, I've got to remember. And these come on and do it, and I just think they're wonderful, absolutely wonderful. The shows are wonderful. They're always a sellout every night, and so now I am retired, I'm down there every Thursday working with them.